Nobody saw this coming. Not after two painful beatdowns. Not after a 76-minute demolition at Queen's Club. And certainly not after months of watching one teenager completely control the head-to-head against a rising Filipina star. But on the biggest tennis stage in the world, in front of 23,000 roaring fans at Arthur Ashe Stadium, everything changed. Eala walked into that exhibition match carrying an 0-2 record against her close friend Iva Jovic, a record that had followed her all summer. A mental barrier she simply could not break through no matter how hard she tried. Then, on the one night nobody expected it, she finally broke through. This is the story of how a friendship, a rivalry, and one unforgettable night in New York collided, and why what happened at the Stars of the Open could end up meaning far more than an exhibition score. To understand why this victory hit so hard, you have to go back to where this rivalry first started to hurt. Rewind to the French Open in May of 2026. Alex steps onto the clay to face Iva Jovic, an 18-year-old American who at the time was ranked 19th in the world. Young, dangerous, and clearly comfortable in the moment. The result was not close. Jovic won 6-4, 6-2. And just like that, the opening chapter of this rivalry was written in the Americans' favor. Now here is what makes this much more complicated than a normal rivalry story. Jovic and Alex were not strangers trading shots from opposite sides of the tour. They were friends. Genuine friends. The kind who had known each other since 2022 when they first crossed paths at the US Open Juniors, a tournament where Alex actually walked away with the girls' singles title. From there, their friendship only grew stronger. They played doubles together at major events like Indian Wells and the ASB Classic. They explored new cities together. They had dinners with other young players on tour. This was not manufactured tennis drama. It was a real connection between two competitors who genuinely liked and respected each other, which somehow made every loss hurt a little more. After that French Open defeat, Alex did not make excuses. She was remarkably open about what made playing her friend so unusually difficult. It was not nerves. It was not intimidation. It was the strange mental adjustment of stepping onto a court against someone who was both a great tennis player and a fierce competitor, with friendship taking a back seat for those 2 hours. She explained how the two had become comfortable with that dynamic, treating each other like professionals and preparing for one another exactly as they would for any other opponent on any other surface. Jovic, for her part, shared that same view. She pointed out that after playing so much doubles together, the two knew each other's tendencies almost perfectly. There were no secrets left to uncover, no surprises left to reveal. At that point, she said, it simply came down to who could execute their game plan better on that specific day. And on that day, it was Jovic. But here is where things became even worse for Alex, not better. Fast forward to Queen's Club in London, June 10th. What should have been a chance to bounce back became an even more one-sided disaster. The score looked almost identical to the French Open, 6-2, 6-2. But the way the defeat happened was somehow even more painful. This was not a competitive battle that slipped away late. This was complete control from beginning to end, finished in only 76 minutes. Think about that for a moment. 76 minutes to dismantle a player who had entered that tournament riding a 5-match winning streak on grass. Jovic did not simply beat Alex that day. She stopped her winning streak, crushed her momentum, and sent a statement that echoed through the rest of Alex's grass season. And the statistics show just how one-sided the match really was. Jovic finished with 26 winners compared with Alex's 12. She made only 9 unforced errors across the entire match, while Alex produced 19. Her forehand quality rating that day was 9.5 out of 10. That was almost video game level consistency, especially considering the draw average was 6-5. She converted 5 breakpoint opportunities and was broken by Alex only once all match. She also won a massive 81% of her first serve points, leaving Alex looking for answers that simply were not available. In her post-match comments, Jovic did not shy away from how well she had played. She admitted that bringing the confidence from their earlier meeting at Roland Garros into this matchup gave her a genuine advantage because she already knew exactly what to expect from Alex's game. She said she felt confident overall going into that stretch, especially on a surface where her tennis had been clicking. Losing to someone once is one thing. Losing twice in a row in increasingly dominant fashion to someone who also happens to be one of your closest friends on tour is something completely different. Someone who, by her own admission, respected Alex deeply both as a person and as a competitor. Jovic even said publicly that she believed there would be plenty more matches between them in the future and that eventually Alex would get her back a couple of times too. That is tennis, she said. Simple as that. But try telling that to a competitor sitting at 0-2, staring at a rivalry that seemed to be moving further and further beyond her reach with every meeting. And yet, even after that second brutal loss, Alex showed something worth noticing, Grace. She did not sulk. She did not deflect. After the French Open defeat, she praised Jovic's performance and said she was genuinely proud of how far she had come and that she was taking the setback in stride. That kind of response tells you something about the mental foundation Alex was building even while the results were not going her way. Because here is the thing about pressure in tennis. It does not only come from ranking points or prize money. Sometimes the heaviest weight in the world is an 0-2 record against a friend. A puzzle you cannot seem to solve no matter how many hours you spend trying to figure it out. And that weight followed Alex through the rest of her summer, all the way to New York, all the way to the one place on tour where everything becomes bigger, louder, and far more meaningful, the US Open. Before we get to the redemption, we need to set the stage properly because context matters. Both players were entering this moment on very different paths when it came to public perception, even though their head-to-head told a completely different story. Alex, 21 years old, had become one of the most exciting breakout stories in tennis throughout the season. She climbed into the world's top 30 and became the highest-ranked Filipino player in WTA history, a milestone that carries meaning far beyond tennis itself. In a country where players reaching this level are exceptionally rare, Jovic, meanwhile, was doing something equally impressive on the other side of the net. At only 18 years old, she had become the youngest player ranked inside the WTA top 20 and had risen to become the fourth-ranked American woman on tour. Two rising stars, two national storylines, one shared rivalry that kept ending the same disappointing way for one of them. So when the pairings for the stars of the Open were announced, tennis fans immediately understood what they were seeing. This was not simply another exhibition match buried inside a lineup of friendly hitting sessions. This was the third chapter of a story that desperately needed a different ending. The Stars of the Open, now in its fourth straight year and presented by Chase, has become one of the signature events of US Open Fan Week. It is a night designed to build excitement for the tournament while also giving back. This year's lineup featured four of the most exciting young players in the sport: Alex Joafonca, Iva Jovic, and Lerner Tien. The kind of marquee names tennis fans will be hearing much more about in the years ahead. And it was not only about entertainment. Tickets started at just $30, with part of the seats benefiting the USA Foundation, the sport's national charitable arm. That foundation supports the National Junior Tennis and Learning Network, a group of more than 270 organizations working to give young people in under-resourced communities access to tennis, academic help, and mentorship. Altogether, that network provides opportunities to more than 233,000 young people, helping them become well-rounded adults long after they put the racket away. Alex, who has repeatedly used her platform to give back throughout her rise, seemed like a natural fit for an event built around that exact mission. But make no mistake, once the balls was in play, this stopped being about charity and became something much more personal for Alex. There were no ranking points at stake. No seeding implications, no direct effect on tour standings. On paper, it was simply an exhibition. Low stakes, high entertainment. Emotionally, though, this was everything. This was a chance to finally solve a puzzle that had frustrated her for months. A chance to prove, even in a non-competitive setting, that she belonged at the same level as the player who had beaten her twice in a row without much resistance. A chance to walk into the US Open main draw with her head held high instead of carrying the psychological burden of an 0-2 record into the most important stretch of her season. And there was something almost poetic about where all of this happened. Arthur Ashe Stadium, the largest tennis stadium in the world, packed with 23,000 fans, many waving Filipino flags, all of them aware of the storyline unfolding right in front of them. This was not Roland Garros. This was not Queen's Club. This was the biggest stage tennis has to offer, and Alex was about to discover whether that stage would finally work in her favor. Before the first ball was struck, Jovic herself had actually talked about wanting their future matchups to happen on a completely different kind of stage. After their Queen's Club meeting, she said she hoped that as both of their rankings continued to rise, they would eventually land on opposite sides of tournament draws and only meet in the later rounds, the semifinals, the finals, moments that would matter on the scoreboard as much as they mattered to the storyline. That comment revealed a lot about where Jovic believed this rivalry was heading. She was not worried about Alex catching up. If anything, she seemed to be looking farther ahead, imagining a version of this rivalry unfolding on center court at majors, deep into tournaments, with real stakes attached. But before any of that could happen, there was unfinished business sitting directly in front of both of them at Arthur Ashe. When the match finally began, the energy inside that stadium was completely different. 23,000 fans settled into a quiet but electric anticipation, watching two close friends put their off-court bond aside and become pure competitors once again. And from the opening exchanges, something felt different. Alex came out aggressively, planting herself on the baseline and controlling the rallies from the very beginning. This was not the hesitant, searching player from Roland Garros or Queen's Club. This was a player who had clearly spent the weeks since her last defeat working through exactly what had gone wrong and exactly what needed to change. Meanwhile, across the net, something equally surprising was unfolding. Jovic, the player who had looked almost untouchable in their previous meeting, was suddenly making uncharacteristic errors. The same forehand that had earned a near-perfect 9.5 out of 10 at Queen's Club was not finding its rhythm. The same composure that had carried her through a 6-2 blowout was not appearing when it mattered most. Alex's movement was sharp. Her shot selection was precise. And with every point she won, you could feel the crowd's energy rising alongside her confidence. Filipino flags waved across the stands every time she held serve. The noise grew louder and louder as the reality of what might be happening started to sink in. The first set went to Alex. And if that alone felt like a small victory after two one-sided losses, what happened next turned this into something much bigger. The second set followed almost the same script. Alex controlled the tempo. Jovic could not find the answers that had come so easily to her only weeks earlier. And when the final point landed, the scoreboard showed something that felt almost impossible to believe after everything that had come before. Alex had done it. She had finally beaten Iva Jovic. The eruption inside Arthur Ashe Stadium was immediate and deafening. The same electric sound that had followed Alex throughout her incredible summer run now filled the largest tennis venue on the planet. The Filipino fans who had packed the stands stood and celebrated, flags waving, her name being chanted throughout the stadium, in a moment that went far beyond a simple exhibition victory. Because make no mistake, this was not only about winning an exhibition match. It was about ending a psychological story that had been building for months. Alex entered the matchup with an 0-2 record against her friend, having lost in straight sets both times and spending much of the season searching for answers to a puzzle that seemed to have no solution. And on the biggest stage of her career so far, in front of the largest crowd she had ever played before, she finally found them. Think about the emotional journey here for a second, because it is genuinely remarkable. This was not a rivalry built on hatred or bad blood. It was built on mutual respect, genuine friendship, and the strange reality of professional sports, where the person you care about away from the court becomes your fiercest opponent the moment the match starts. Jovic explained it best herself after their Queen's Club meeting, saying she wanted Alex to win every match she played, except, of course, the ones against her. When they stepped onto the court together, she said they were simply competing. Nothing more, nothing less. And that is exactly the mindset both players seemed to bring into this exhibition. Friendship paused, competition activated. No hard feelings either way, regardless of the result. But for Alex specifically, the result mattered more than she probably admitted beforehand. Because here is the bigger picture surrounding this entire storyline. This was not happening in isolation. This victory came at the exact moment Alex was stepping into the biggest tournament of her season. She enters the U.S. Open main draw with a career-high ranking of world number 18, officially making her the highest-ranked Filipino tennis player in history. To understand just how dramatic that rise has been, consider where she was this time last year. Alex was still fighting through qualifying rounds just to reach main draws at all. Now, she is expected to receive a seeding in the women's singles draw at the U.S. Open for the first time in her career. That is not a small jump. It is a complete transformation in where she stands within the sport. And it is happening at exactly the moment fans are beginning to pay much closer attention to her name. So when you look at the timing of this win over Jovic, it starts to feel much less like a footnote and much more like a turning point. Walking into a Grand Slam main draw, carrying a two-match losing streak against a rival, even a friendly one, creates a certain kind of doubt that can quietly follow a player through every practice session, every warm-up, every pre-match routine. Walking in instead with a statement victory on the biggest stage in tennis, in front of a career-record crowd, sends a completely different message, both to herself and to everyone watching. It says the puzzle is no longer impossible. It says the frustrations of the summer do not define her. It says she is arriving at the US Open with genuine momentum instead of genuine doubt. Now, it is important to be clear about exactly what this victory was and was not, because context and nuance matter. This was an exhibition. There were no ranking points involved, no direct impact on tour standings, and no effect whatsoever on where Alex or Jovic will actually be seeded or drawn against each other in future tournaments. If anything, based on Jovic's own comments about wanting to face Alex deeper in future draws, this rivalry is far from over. In fact, it may only be beginning in a much more meaningful way. But psychologically, emotionally, and in terms of pure competitive confidence heading into the most important stretch of Alex's season, this result matters enormously. Confidence in professional tennis is not simply some abstract feel-good idea. It influences shot selection under pressure. It affects how a player responds after dropping the first set. It shapes whether a player believes she can fight back from a breakdown against a dangerous opponent. Alex now walks into the US Open, having proven to herself in the most public way possible that she can go toe-to-toe with one of the most promising young Americans on tour and come out on top. That is the kind of belief that can carry a player through the brutal grind of a Grand Slam draw. So, what does all of this mean going forward? For Alex, the immediate question is whether this exhibition victory turns into real tournament success over the next 2 weeks in New York. She is entering as a seeded player for the first time in her career, carrying a career-high ranking, carrying a signature victory over a top American talent, and carrying the momentum of an entire summer that transformed her from a rising name into a legitimate contender. The pressure of being a seeded player at a Grand Slam is a completely different challenge from fighting through qualifying, and how Alex handles that new level of expectation will reveal a lot about where her career goes from here. For Jovic, this loss, even in an exhibition, probably does not derail much of anything. She remains the fourth-ranked American woman on tour, still the youngest player inside the WTA Top 20, and still very much part of the sport's rising generation. If anything, based on her own comments, she seems to view this rivalry as a long-term storyline rather than a short-term battle, one she fully expects to develop over years of head-to-head meetings on much bigger stages than an exhibition night. And for tennis fans, the biggest takeaway may be the rarest kind of sports storyline. Two young stars who genuinely like each other, who support one another away from the court, and who still manage to deliver must-watch drama every time they step onto it. This is not a manufactured rivalry built around trash talk and controversy. It is a genuine competition between two friends who may be building something special, one match at a time.